But in dealing with the end of the war, it needs to change. Because what happened after World War I? How did the war end in World War I?
World War I?
Yeah, World War I. How did it end?
We won.
Well, yes, we won. But then what happened afterwards? I mean, the war has to end somehow.
They didn't bomb, right? They didn't bomb. It was World War II.
No, there was no bombs at the end of World War I. It was clear that the Allies were going to win World War I. So, what did the Allies create to end the war? Not bombs. A treaty. The Treaty of Versailles. Very good. So, yes, that's what I said World War I about 4 times. Yes. So, World War I ends with the Treaty of Versailles. But, what is wrong with the Treaty of Versailles? They didn't invite the Central Powers. It's a big FU, right? So, what is written in the Treaty of Versailles? Why is it bad? So we have the Treaty of Versailles. We know it's bad. But why is it bad? What does it say in there? Is it blame Germany? And Daniel, what did you say? Wait, what?
They have to pay.
Yes, that's what I'm looking for. Germany has to pay what's called reparations. Basically, this is big, big money. And they take a lot of their land, they demilitarize them, basically puts Germany in a terrible, terrible spot. So what happens to Germany? Major, major depression. With the depression, we see the lead, oh, no, not the lead, that's the wrong word. We see the rise of a very strong political figure. Adolf Hitler. Hitler, keeping the Holocaust aside for now, Hitler rises to power, fixes Germany up, but what does he want to do? Well, besides keeping the Holocaust aside, he wants to get his land back. And what does he do with the reparations?
He pays a little bit and stops.
Yeah, he just stops. He stops paying those bad boys. He says, screw you guys. I can't afford to do that. I can't afford to do that. But he wants to get his land back. In getting his land back, it starts something else. So he gets the Sudetenland. Britain and France say, okay. He gets Czechoslovakia. Britain and France say, okay. He gets back the Rhineland. Britain and France say, okay. That's known as appeasement. They're just giving in to him because they don't want to start another fight. But Hitler then goes to Poland, and Britain says, enough's enough. And what do? They declare war. So, it starts World War II. So you can argue that the Treaty of Versailles eventually leads to World War II. Right? We just talked about it. Treaty of Versailles was so mean and so cruel towards Germany that Germany was in such a bad spot that they elect this great, great leader, Adolf Hitler, who says the Treaty of Versailles was unfair. We need to get our land back. We're not going to pay the reparations. So they were pissed off at the Allies. It makes sense, right? We can empathize with Germany a little bit. That's why I said keep the Holocaust aside. So Hitler, with the Treaty of Versailles in his mind, he keeps it in the German people's mind as well. And he then starts World War II. So, after World War II, do you think that the countries who won and the countries who lost are going to keep the same mindset and blame the losers again? Or are they going to change their mind this time? They're going to change their mind. They do not. After World War I, remember, they said, this is the war to end all wars. We're never going to go to war again. 20 years later, everybody's fighting with each other again. So they said, we have to change how we do things. But Adolf Hitler did much worse things than start World War II. And that was the Holocaust. Kills 6 million Jews, 3 million others, including gays, lesbians, Africans, blacks, I should say. They weren't African Americans. Gypsies, all things like that. And therefore, the Nazis are put on trial. The Nazis are put on trial. But not just by one country. Not just the Americans.
Sir, why do people always like talk about this?
What do you mean, why do they always talk about them?
They always talk bad about them.
Well, gypsies have a very different lifestyle than others. And always in sort of human nature, anybody that's different from you, you tend to make fun of them. That's not right. It's not okay, but that's just what happens. Why do people always, thank you. Why do people always make fun of African Americans? Why do people always make fun of homosexuals? Why do people make fun of Hispanic Americans? It's because they're different.
They don't make fun of me.
Well, I don't, no. But people do, right? Or they lump all Hispanics and say they're all Mexicans, right? Or all Puerto Ricans.
I hate that.
So do I. But it happens, right? So, and going back here, that's what the Nazis did. They chose everybody else besides them and killed them, exterminated them. So, they are put on trial. But it's not just one country that does it. It's an international organization, international effort to do so. It was the first time, where is it? Oh, it's not on. First time that what does the word international mean?
All over the world.
All over the world. So all countries are part of this trial. Why do you think they did that? Why do you think all the countries in the world got to put... Well, it was a world war, yes. Why else? Let me put it this way. If it was just up to, say, France, who's had a long rivalry with Germany, who does not get along with them, if it was just up to France, what would happen, do you think? Do you think they would be harder on Germany or easier on Germany? They'd be much harder on Germany. But if you bring in countries like, say, Austria, who has political ties to Germany, it's a little bit nicer, right? So the international feel of it makes it a lot more even of a playing field. That makes sense, right? You'd rather have an even trial than a harsh one. However, was Hitler put on trial? No, why not? He already killed himself. Hitler kills himself. He kills his family. Well, makes his family kill themselves as well. His wife and his 2 children. Makes them kill themselves as well. Why do you think he did that? Well, we know why he killed himself. But why do you think he made his family kill themselves? What'd you say? Right. Exactly. And that's what you said too, right, Tom? Yeah, he didn't want them to face repercussions for what he did. So it's a cowardly way out, yes, but I mean, I agree with you. I agree with you. And I try to say, like, let's get into the mind of him, but that's just sick and twisted. No, I don't think so. And which is why I think he killed himself. He wanted to go out on his own terms, kind of. Yeah. So.
I thought they killed him because if they catch them, they're gonna do something.
Well, exactly. That's why he killed himself. That's what we're saying, so that he doesn't get punished. Many other Nazi leaders killed themselves as well. And in fact, the third guy in line, most important Nazi, Joseph Goebbels, was put on trial, but was also held in prison, and he kills himself as well in prison. Again, with the same mentality that they're going to do a lot worse than me killing myself.
Did they drag the leader from
Italy? Italy, yeah. They dragged him around in the streets. Benito Mussolini. So again, this is all a brand new concept, an international field. Now, the other side of the war in the Pacific, so in Japan, Japanese leaders, including Hideki Tojo, the leader of their army, commander of their army, are also put on trial for their war crimes. The Japanese were extremely ruthless, and we talked about this before break, about how they don't surrender, how they are extremely upstanding moral characters when it comes to being a soldier, but that means they're extremely harsh on other soldiers, including, and the majority of which were American and British soldiers. So they treated them terribly, tortured and killed, and just brutal to the American prisoners of war. And men like Hideki Tojo were put on trial for that. And like I had mentioned, this is going to serve as a jumping off point for what's called the International Criminal Court, an international organization to deal with things like this. So, because now American and British soldiers mostly were tortured and were subject to death during prisoner of war camps in Japan. Would it be fair for just the Americans to put the Japanese on trial? No, because there was a hatred there.
But didn't they want to since that Pearl Harbor?
Well, you're exactly right, but they set up an international council.
Were we allies with them before Pearl Harbor?
Kind
Not
of.
really.
Remember, we forced ourselves upon Japan. We forced them open to trade. We forced them to be more like us. So that's why they got us back. But it sets up this idea for an international court so that countries from all around the world can put them on trial rather than just the people who they're being put on trial for. Now, let's bring this to a modern context. Something that you might be able to relate to. Something you might have heard in the news. On Wednesday, the Boston Marathon bomber was put on trial, and he was convicted of all 30 accounts of terrorism. Right? We remember that happening. He was just convicted. All 30 he's guilty of.
He's gonna rot in jail.
Well,
Where is he being put?
I think they were deciding that yesterday, but I haven't looked. Anybody know? They haven't decided yet. Well, yes, some of them are guilty by death. However, he's going to go through a hearing through something like the International Criminal Court because he's not an American citizen, so he can't be tried as an American. He has to be tried as an international criminal. So he sees a quote-unquote more fair trial for himself because he's an international criminal. Now, whether or not that's fair, but we all have the mindset. What is our mindset in this room? What should they do to him? They should kill him, right? We think that because we're Americans. We saw dozens of American lives be wasted because he was a criminal. I'm talking about the Boston Marathon bomber, like right now. Oh, half a dozen. It doesn't matter. It's a lot of lives, right? It's more than his life. So we think, and I would say maybe a general consensus, that he should be put to death. But, to his credit, he's going to get a fair trial to see if the death penalty is what he deserves from other countries around the world, and other countries will be represented to give him a better chance. All right, let's move on. Any other questions about that kind of stuff? So, like I had mentioned, there's going to be two great superpowers that come out of World War II. We know the first one, the United States. The United States will be arguably the most powerful country in the world after World War II, both economically and militarily. And politically, I suppose you could say as well. And who's the other one? What's this other one down here? What's this flag? I'm sorry? It's not Russia. It's called the Soviet Union. Yes, let's get that into our brains. It is where Russia is, yes, but let's say the Soviet Union. So these two great superpowers are going to go into what's called the Cold War. What does a Cold War mean? Okay, we pointed missiles at each other. If you shoot, we shoot kind of mentality. But did anybody shoot? No. So a Cold War is a war in which no fighting occurs. So if no fighting is occurring, why do they call it a war? What does that mean then? If no fighting occurs, how can it be a war? Can you have a fight without punching somebody?
Yeah.
What is it then? Like an argument. Exactly. The United States and the Soviet Union are going to argue. And they're going to argue over political ideology and economics. The United States is the beacon of democracy. They say that every country in the entire world should be democratic. They should choose their own leaders. And it should be by the people who live there. Makes sense. That's what we've grown up with. That's what the majority of Americans believe in, at least to some degree. The Soviet Union, on the other hand, they are communists and ruled by a dictatorship. So the communists believe in equality under the law for everybody. However, everything is state controlled. So everything that you do is owned by the state. There should be no religion. There should be no ownership of anything because everything is shared. And all that kind of stuff. So, that is the battle that goes on from 1945 until the great year of 1989. Why is it great? Because the Cold War ended and I was born. Makes sense. So this struggle, this war, is going to last for all that time. However, there's no actual fighting now. There are skirmishes and wars within this war that there was fighting going on. The Korean War fought over democracy versus communism. Vietnam, democracy over communism. But it wasn't a struggle directly between the United States and the Soviet Union. We'll talk about those in the coming weeks. Along with the idea of an international criminal court, there are other organizations as well. If we remember, the League of Nations was created after World War I. It was completely ineffective, and what they do is they reshape it and call it something different. They call it the United Nations. And the United Nations invites everybody, and still is around today. It's an international peacekeeping organization and is represented by 237 countries today. That's a lot of countries, right? Their main goal is to keep peace throughout the world. It is supposed to be an unbiased organization that will try to solve conflicts rather than going to war. We also have something called the International Monetary Fund. Again, the idea that countries who are a little bit poorer need a little bit of stimulation and growth, right? So the lens turns to countries in, say, Africa that were completely beat down by colonial powers in Europe and are finally freed and given sovereignty for the first time in 150 years. And therefore, countries that can afford it and this International Monetary Fund can help stimulate economic growth in those countries. I missed a point in the last slide, but we can relate to it, and we've talked about it a couple of times throughout this year, is that wars now are different. Wars used to be fought between country and country. Now wars are fought. How are wars fought now? Or what are wars fought over now? Okay, groups or organizations. And what is the main driver of those conflicts? It's not necessarily taking over territory, like a lot of wars are. It's not necessarily about money, like many wars used to be. But it's over ideology. So, like right now, we are in a war with what? Or who? Right now, like today. Who are we at war with now? You could say Afghanistan, but it's mostly ISIS. Iraq. And
like sort of declared like war
it's
without actually setting it in.
it's weird, right? It's weird to say because we could say we're mostly at war against something rather than against a different country.
It's a student receiver pass to come to the front office. I'll grab it.
Yes.
He left?
Yeah, he left.
Okay. Hasn't found his way to the front office. Okay.
We can say we're fighting terrorism rather than a country because does terrorism always land itself in one country? What is terrorism?
It is when you cause terror in different countries that you don't like, just like that.
Okay. It is to cause terror and fear in different countries that you do not like. However, why do terrorist organizations begin?
They don't like one race.
Okay, it might be that. It's usually something a little bit closer to home. Closer to home. Let me put it on a small scale for you, because you probably don't relate the two, though they are extremely related. Why do gangs start?
Family.
What?
Family.
Okay, maybe family. What else?
Hatred towards other people.
Okay, so it starts it's more simple than that.
Territory.
Okay, getting closer. Territory, money, power, yes. Power. But why do gangs want to control things?
That's how they make their money.
Okay, that's how they make their money. But there's something deeper rooted in why gangs start. Why do gangs want power?
So that they can know.
All right. Still, something more simple than that. Somebody said it. Protection. Well, don't the police offer protection?
Yeah. But
You don't have to
some
get-
places are corrupt.
Okay. Go further. So why do gangs start? They want protection.
From other people.
Well, they want to provide their own protection, right? Because they don't feel protected by the police, or they don't feel represented by the government. Right? That makes sense to us, correct? And no, it doesn't. Why not?
In the sense that they want protection.
What's that?
In the sense that they want protection.
You don't think that makes sense?
Yeah.
So, gangs turn into much bigger things, and they turn to different things. Territory, money, and power. But it usually drives from them wanting protection. They don't feel that the police, in whatever city that they live in, or town that they live in, protect them. And therefore, they offer protection for people to join their gang to gain more power. It's a double-edged sword for them. Terrorist organizations are the same way. Al-Qaeda and ISIS, two different terrorist organizations, offer protection rather than being protected by the government. They see that their government is, let's say in Afghanistan, is controlled by the United States. It's a Western idea, driven by Christian values and things like that. And therefore, ISIS does not like America because it is not them. Does that make sense? So, like, they don't feel connected to that government. And therefore, they lash out at countries like America, like England. So now wars have changed. Because you can't technically go after Afghanistan, because Afghanistan is a country that we align with. But it's an organization within that country, or that has roots to that country, that we have to go after. So it makes it a lot more difficult. Questions? All right, let's move on back here. Going back to that mentality of after World War I, where we blamed Germany for the war. We made them pay for the war. The United States and other Allied winners make up a different plan. Rather than blaming them and leaving them high and dry, they get involved. The United States, Great Britain, and France get involved, and they go into those countries and help them build back their country. So instead of kicking their enemy when they were down, they lended a hand and picked them back up. It's like when on the football field a player gets tackled, and it's a big tackle, right? But then the opposing player who just tackled you picks you back up. It seems something. All right? Good sportsmanship. Yeah, and that's exactly what happens here. Because even though that guy just tackled you, was it personal? Does he not like you? Is a linebacker that just crushed you, does he hate you? No. He might not like your team. He might not. He's doing his job. But he doesn't have anything personal against you. And that's what happens here. They don't have anything personal against their new country, their new government, because the Nazis are gone. So they say, instead of kicking you while you're down, we're going to help you build back up. And what does that do then? If somebody helps you out, what's going to happen? Okay, Tyler said they expect something back. What do you expect back then? Rather than being enemies, what could you now be? Allies. Or at least have a good relationship. At least have a good relationship. It's kind of like, You ask somebody for $1. You're really hungry in lunch. You need $1. You don't have anything. Somebody gives you that $1. Even if they're not your best friend, they don't have to be, but you're going to see that person differently now, right? After hopefully giving them their $1 back.
Not really.
Why not? Communist, yep. What's that, Omar? Go ahead.
Not really, 'cause that's what you're supposed to do.
That's what?
That's what you're supposed to do.
That's what you're supposed to do because it's a nice gesture. You don't have, I mean, it's your money. You don't have to give it to them. But that's a good mentality. That's what you think you should have to do, and that's nice. But say somebody in here, Omar, came up to you that you're not friends with and asked you for $1, would you give it to them? If they were like really hungry and you could tell that they were being nice.
It depends who it was.
All right. Well, it didn't depend who it was. Even though we just fought a war with them, and they killed hundreds of thousands of our soldiers, and we killed hundreds of thousands of their soldiers, it wasn't on a personal basis. We wanted to help build them back up. But it came with a price, like Tyler said. Because, guess what? The Soviet Union's doing the same thing. They're trying to help build them back up, but then they say, hey, you got to be our allies, and we said, hey, you got to be our allies. And that's what the Cold War is originally fought over. It's these newly sovereign countries, newly freed countries, but we're sort of in their back pocket and like, hey, you should be like us, kind of deal. It's like, what is it like? It's like, say you're I don't think you understand. Oh, how about this? So your sports team gets knocked out of the playoffs. But your best friends did it. You might be more apt to root for your best friend's team as long as you don't hate them for some reason. They didn't beat your team because they have an influence on you. I think that's the best way I can describe it. These countries were getting persuaded to be one way or the other. And that's what the Soviet Union and the Americans are going to fight about for at least 20 years or so before it gets into different kinds of... All right. Moving on. Japan, same story. Now, we literally destroyed Japan. Like the country itself, destroyed it. Cities, destroyed. Both with firebombing before we used the atomic bomb. But as soon as we kicked their ass, as soon as we destroyed them, we came back, we pulled them up, and we said, hey, we're going to help you out. Because you need it. We destroyed you, yes. But it was because what your government stood for. Now, we're going to help you, but you have to be our friend. Makes sense.
How does that make sense?
It's the mentality of we scratch your bag, you have to scratch ours.
I get it.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is a weird one, but it's almost as if well, this might be a little contentious, but it's okay. Two gangs get in a fight over territory. Huh? Oh, thank you. Two gangs get in a fight. And it's over territory. And one gang clearly wins. And that gang kills almost everybody. And what happens is that one gang gets dissolved. The one that loses. But there's still a few gang members left who are living. Now they have a choice.
You could go after them.
They could go after them again
Or leave.
or join them. And what the one gang that wins, they say, hey, look, we're going to take your weapons because we took Japanese military away from them. They said, we're going to take your weapons and you can join us. And we will protect you. Or we can still destroy you if you want. It's your choice. Smart people who want to live would say, okay, here's my gun. Here's my knife. Dumb people, in my mind, would fight back and get destroyed. It's a matter of pride, I guess, at that point. But that's what we do. That's what we did, and that's how we helped them. All right. Any questions on anything of the end of World War II, jumping us off into the Cold War struggle? All right. Let's introduce you to the Cold War. I have to go get books that I forgot about. No, those are notes for you.